This is kind of a nice lead-in for me. If you could take Steve's presentation, and then Cliff's presentation, and then John's presentation, add them all together, apply them to Polk County, then I don't need to talk at all. But I think it's interesting that how things are evolving. What I'm going to try to do is connect the idea of sustainability and sustainable water resource management to environmental lands and preservation, and looking at that from a cost-benefit standpoint and how we incorporate the benefits to society in general, not only from an environmental perspective, but from an economic perspective. And I'm going to try to do that in 20 minutes. The chances are I'm not going to be successful, so I hope we can talk later. Kind of figure out what I'm doing here. So here's the definition of sustainability that most people kind of see as the official definition, and it's that balance between the social, economic, and environmental aspects of everything we do. So you see the statement at top is something sustainable if this happens. So we're asking the question in Winter Haven and the area and the watershed area that we're part of, who decides when something is sustainable? Who makes that decision? If you have the like Steve talked about, if you have the coalition and people that are interested in working together, you can actually define what that means for a particular community. So communities have to be directly involved in that. So then you ask another question: who's responsible when something's not sustainable? And then you kind of think of, well, gosh, is that the agencies or the government, or who is that? Also the opposing question is not only who's accountable, but who pays the price when something's not sustainable. Then you have to look at local governments and communities, those kind of things as well too. So those are kind of questions that we're wrestling with and we're trying to answer as we move forward with our planning process. So then you come across terms like integrated management, cost benefit, community visioning and planning. You have all these things that are going on. All these terms that get thrown around, and it's all part of this big planning process. I am advocating that this all fits under the general umbrella of sustainability. So one thing that I'd like to try to communicate and advocate for is that sustainability is not only an end goal of something we're trying to achieve, it's also the process of doing that. Like Steve Sintez was just saying before, it's that coalition, it's that partnering, it's that getting together and making those decisions collectively, using the science and best information. The process of that is a circular process. It's not a linear process. It's an ongoing kind of thing. So we're really trying to target that in how we apply those concepts in our area. We're in the very early stages of that, very complicated, but something that I think answers a lot of questions we have in today's world. I'd like to introduce you to Winter Haven. The circle area is the downtown area. We call ourselves an island in the middle of all these lakes. So I think we're very uniquely situated. Our community loves our lakes just like y'all love the area down here where you are. We love the water. We love being around the water. We love enjoying the water. So what you're talking about there is the social and cultural benefits, correct? Not only the environmental benefits. So our Chamber of Commerce in the year 2000, before sustainability was ever popular, the number one statement in their visioning process was that water benefits all of our economy, culture, and our environment. So this is our chamber. This is our business community talking. And this is the statement they come up with before sustainability even was popular. This statement right here changed my career in Winter Haven forever. I realized that it was my job not to manage stormwater and do those kind of things. My job was to protect the social, cultural, and economic heritage of our community as a resource manager. So it was a big change in paradigm for me as a professional. Here is where we're located in the Peace River watershed. The circular area is the location of the Peace Creek watershed. That's the hydrologic unit that I'm going to talk about quite a bit. You can see what they're very tip top of the Peace River watershed that feeds a lot of the water into Charlotte Harbor. If you walk out today or look out the window right here, you see how brown and tan that water is. So that's the water washing out of the swamps and wetland areas out of the Mayak and Peace Rivers. And I forgot what the flow is. I'm sure any people could tell us, but I think it's over 50% of the flow into the Charlotte Harbor comes out of Peace River. But here's something you don't know. So if you take what Cliff was talking about, remember Cliff was generalizing and said, oh, the recharge for the Florida aquifer, it happens in the upland area. Well, that upland area a lot of it happens in Winter Haven and along the Lake Wales Ridge. The groundwater boundary that separates East and West Florida goes right through the middle of Winter Haven. So water that recharges our area feeds agriculture, mining, industry, well fields, from the Sarasota, Manatee County areas. So that recharge happens where we live. That's where we are trying to manage this watershed for the benefit of everybody concerned. So the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program kind of adopted this concept last year and kind of agreed that this was a good hydrologic restoration approach. So we're very encouraged that we got that endorsement and that support. But this area has significant problems. Peace River goes dry most years. Pretty much every year you can launch a canoe in Bartow, paddle about a mile downstream, and it goes like all the way dry. Water's going down the sinkholes, instead of bubbling up through what used to be springs in that watershed. About a third of all the 100 lakes in the watershed are either stressed or don't meet their MFLs. So significant hydrologic problems. 40 lakes in the watershed are impaired, and in Winter Haven, about 24 out of the 40 exist in Winter Haven. So about half of all of our lakes are listed as impaired for the phosphorus and nitrogen. But here's a key component to that. We believe that the lakes aren't necessarily impaired just for the nutrient inflow. We think they're impaired mostly because of the hydrology. So our hydrologic concerns related to our lakes are very similar to the hydrologic concerns we have to Charlotte Harbor. So the question we're asking is not how do we fix water quality. The question that we're asking is how do we get the water right? How do we fix the hydrology? So those are the questions that tend to happen. Now, this is leading somewhere, I promise. We're going to talk about the connection between land and water, correct? So this is a conservation lands kind of workshop. The conservation between the lands and the water, we have to make that in a very real way. And it's not just for water or land. We have to incorporate the economic and social component to that as well too, right? So what we're proposing is a solution to that problem. We're saying there's an answer to that question. Now, I'm not sure many people would kind of agree or even realize that there are answers to those questions that we can get to if we work together. So that's where I'm headed with this. Here is a map of the Peace Creek watershed. So here's Winter Haven is kind of right in the middle of that. We have Auburndale, Haines City in the northern parts, Lake Wales, Bartow, the southern parts. So Winter Haven is trying to take a lead role in how this watershed gets managed because the future of our water resources depends on it. Within this watershed over 100 years, there's 40 miles of drainage ditches that drains the watershed every time it rains. We've urbanized over the recharge areas that supplies the water to mining, agriculture, and well fields, that kind of stuff. We've paved over quite a bit of those recharge areas already, and we're kind of working and we're hoping we can pave over more of it for economic growth. So how we do that is really important. We're not saying stop development. Nobody in their right mind is going to say that in today's political world. But how you do that, how you develop those recharge areas is really important. How we develop in Winter Haven in this area might be very different from how you might develop in Sarasota, Manatee, Lee counties, those areas. So anybody in this part of the watershed should be really interested in how that growth happens up in the headwaters areas where we are. On top of that, not only are we in bad shape now and we have all these drainage, all these things going on over the last 100 years, we're expecting about 100,000 people over the next few decades to come to this watershed. This is where Legoland is and the CSX terminal, new Polk Parkways being planned. We're really excited about our economic potential. So 100,000 people got to get here and we got to make room for them. And how we do that's really important. So now you're talking about how you use land and that relationship of water, and we're exploring new ways to solve those issues. Our city commission adopted what's called the Sustainable Water Resource Management Plan in December 2010. Here's one of the key statements in that plan. The current approach to managing water resources is not sustainable. So we're acknowledging that if we keep doing what we're doing today, as we grow into the future and add 100,000 people, that things are going to continue to get worse. So then the question comes out, how do you plan growth and make that work so water, economic, environment, social, cultural, how do you plan growth so all that gets better? Most people in in leadership capacity understand that economic growth is the thing we're really after. But most people would realize and understand that we have to do that in a way that balances all those other interests. So those, we think, are the challenges that we're trying to face in the future. So here's some of the cultural and social benefits. One of the things I like to point out, I'm going to kind of say this knowing it's going to make us look bad, but the Winter Haven Lakeland area just got ranked as the 7th most obese area in the nation. And I took that, I think, gosh, what is happening? Kids on computer games or, just too much TV, just trying to figure that out. Well, I think of it as that disconnect between our natural world and, in our electronic world, or, we're not making those connections. So how do you do that? Well, we're proposing our long-range plans at least helps in that regard. We think it's going to help people get exercise, get outdoors. We think it's going to help education. So all those social, cultural things that we think is going to help, we're trying to incorporate that into our plan. The presentation I'm making is a kind of a combination of a presentation. Tom Singleton, who is a consultant that helped us develop the original plan, and the Balmoral group that here is doing, we're looking at doing an economic evaluation of these types of services. How do you bring all that together into a long-term plan that a political body will understand? We think that the framework for that is an economic evaluation. How do you really look at all those components and bring it together in a way that people can kind of get a hold of? So we think that the science is good enough in the long term to begin bringing that together. So I'm not going to read all this to you. I think I've already said most of this already, but I wanted to kind of show you the outline of that. So the past ideas of how we solve those problems has been more engineering and technologically related, and now we're looking at this economic evaluation approach. So we're looking at previously we would look at the cost of building, maintaining, and replacing infrastructure just as a standalone component. So a map, and this is going to be probably hard to see, but if you look at projects related to just that engineering component, it looks one way. If you start looking at social, environmental, and cultural benefits, the map begins to look different. The projects that you do, once you look at the social and cultural aspects, are going to be different than those projects that you looked at just from a technological engineering perspective. So, and we think that's a significant factor that we've generally tended to overlook in the past. So here's the areas that tend to change. The green dot in this circle is a priority project. Whereas you look at the social, cultural aspects, those green dots accumulate in particular areas. And not only that, how you look at that within the watershed and the functions and the relationships it has are really important. It just so happens this is a study that was done in the Wekiva River watershed west of Orlando, and how we protect Wekiva Springs and those areas, which is one of the examples we use. So here is our restoration map. I didn't even look and see where the pointer was, but so here is the map of the Peace Creek watershed area. All the blue areas you see on that map represents about 7,500 acres of wetland restoration projects that we're proposing happen as we grow and develop in the future. So what we're saying is that one of the solutions to water resources is storage, correct? I mean, I think almost everybody would agree with that. So we're not saying we want to restore these wetlands simply for the environmental parts. If I was to do that, I don't think anybody in Polk County would really listen very much. But when I talk to them about storing 27 billion gallons of water, they get very interested. When I talk about providing water quality benefits, social cultural benefits by creating these open spaces, these beautiful areas, we also talk about, and a lot of y'all, I can hear this collective gasp about to happen, but when you store water, we also create waterfront property for future development. In case you didn't realize, and I'm being very facetious, but waterfront property is way more valuable than just regular property in a wet, swampy area, correct? So the developers in our area are really excited about this idea. So, we don't tell them we're creating 7,500 acres of wetlands. They wouldn't like that idea. When we tell them we're creating 7,500 acres of waterfront property, they get pretty excited about that. So there's the social economic part of that. From that side of it, we're playing to that very strongly and trying to gain their support and how this comes to build. And here's the other really exciting factor to them. If future development is helping restore the watershed, then every development that comes in that helps restore that watershed, they should be getting their permits like this. So we're talking about wetland mitigation credits, water quality credits, managing regional stormwater ponds in these wetland restoration areas. So we're talking about getting their support for creating these areas to facilitate future growth and development. And this is a sideline, but one of the things we're looking at is like a sustainability calculation for water resources. Every development that comes in ought to, at a minimum, balance out from a water resource perspective, if not add to the water budget long term. So we're looking at tools, to be able to help us do that down the road as we permit future development. So the old process that we're followed, this says regulatory, but I would think of that as the engineering technical solutions. The new process is all about strategic planning, setting goals, creating partnerships and incentives, just like Steve Sintez was saying before. When we talk about things like TMDLs and water quality criteria in Winter Haven, or we talk about MFLs and minimum flows and levels, we talk about those as the minimum criteria. Those aren't the goals we're trying to achieve. That's the minimum criteria. The goals we're trying to achieve are so much more than that. We just tend to ignore the minimum criteria. Meeting TMDLs for our community is not what we want long term. We want to be better than that. We want to restore more areas than that. So this conversation kind of transcends just that meeting of the minimum criteria that a lot of people talk about. Here's the other aspect of this that's really important, I think. There's not enough money from the government field and aspect to fund these kind of projects. So that money has to come from different sources, partnerships, those kind of things. If we start talking about water supply credits or using utility money to protect these recharge areas or water quality credits to help pay for these, stormwater utilities, those kind of things, then the money starts forming and partnering. So there's a lot of tools out there that we haven't taken full advantage of yet, I think is the message there. So Tabitha Beal, I don't know if she's still here or not, she was talking about how popular Circle B is up in our part of the watershed. All these circles represent projects about the size of Circle B. So when I'm out talking to the community, it's not about wetland restoration so much. It's about creating projects like Circle B that generate walking trails and boardwalks and wildlife viewing and those kind of things. And people around our area tend to realize what benefits that creates. So, we want to link those up long term. Anyway, just in summary, I think in an urbanizing watershed, especially in Polk County, kind of talking about these ideas simply as conservation projects, I don't think is going to go very far. I think when we talk about this, we talk about lands and preserving lands and how we manage lands as the best way to meet the future goals for our economic, social, cultural, and environmental communities. We think it's the best way to restore water resources. We think it's the best way to supply water supply for the future, not only for ourselves, but everybody else downstream. And we think that the cost benefit of this is going to work out. And we're just now beginning the process of doing an economic evaluation for our area to kind of show how that happens to our political leadership. So we're just now kind of entering this process, but I wanted to kind of explain that direction and let y'all know maybe where all this is headed for us. That's it.
Okay, excellent. Are there any questions? Oh boy, the hands go up. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that very interesting talk. I do have a question about the new wetlands you're developing and the development around them. Do you have any special requirements for septic systems around those lakes? or wetlands?
I haven't got that far yet. Because it's an urbanizing area, most of the areas that are going to be falling under the city of Winter Haven or the other local government permitting will have to be on water and sewer. So, yeah, we wouldn't tend to allow septic tanks in developments we permit.
Mike, I'm really excited about your 27 billion gallons that you're going to save. That's what we ran down the Caloosahatchee the last 3 days to tide.
Oh, wow.
You're a lot closer to Orlando than we are. Is there any serious discussion talking about diverting the water which we are wasting to tide in the South Florida Water Management District that might be of beneficial use for our aquifer recharge in the Southwest?
Not that I know of. The biggest talk in our area right now is they're looking to drill a new well field in southeast Polk County that's more along the Kissimmee River watershed area. They're talking about drilling a well field in the lower Floridan aquifer below the potable zone necessarily for an alternative supply. And they're talking about bringing that water into the Winter Haven, East Polk County area. So that's the biggest thing going on right now that we're aware of.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mike. Well, we've reached that time, the time for our afternoon break, and I wanted to invite you all, if you wanted to take any extra materials, go ahead and pick them up now to take home. I think everyone would prefer for them to go out in the community.